Hey folks, it's JR. We're back. Echoes of Shannon Street case file. It's episode 3, The Call, part 2. This part in the series we're gonna cover from the time that Officer Hester and Officer Schwill get to the house. Then we'll get through the assaults and everything leading up to just prior to backup officers arriving on the scene. Now, prior to that, we're going to see just a little bit about what Bobby Hester and Ray Schwill were doing prior to making that call to Shannon Street. Just a few seconds of that, and then we'll get to the statements. Bobby Hester and Ray Schwill were assigned to the North Precinct, which is 3363 Old Allen Road, right off Fraser Boulevard. Their roll call was at 1600 hours. It's when they started their tour of duty. Now, if you're any good policeman, you're going to want to get something to eat. So if you don't get a call right out of the precinct, then you're going to run and get something to eat because you don't know if you'll get another chance. So they went to 2731 Range Line to get them a bite to eat at around 5 p.m. We do know that after they ate, they made a call at 2138 Chelsea on a suspicious person. They had a relatively slow night. They also made a call at 2327 Vandale. That also was a suspicious person call. Burglar alarm at 1337 Warford, which that's about half of the calls a police officer will make every night. Then they did a burglar alarm at 3998 Wales. When they got up there, it was a vacant lot, so we're not really sure how you get an alarm at a vacant lot. And then later on, they had coffee with their lieutenant at Jackson in Hollywood. You know, this is 2138 Chelsea, present day. Back in the day, it was a grocery store, market. About 8:58, we know they were there talking to the clerk when they got the call. We believe they left eastbound on Chelsea and then went northbound on Hyde Park to go to the call at 2239 Shannon. Why don't we ride with them? This would have been the path they would have taken to 2239 Shannon. Eastbound on Chelsea and then northbound on Hyde Park.
One 28, claimed that 239 Shannon, male named Coleman, advised that he just arrived home and neighbors stated that the police were there looking for him earlier in regards to some person accident. He's there, wants to try to get it straightened out. As far as we know, it was on the day shift. We had no calls on it ourselves. 2239 Shannon. 20.
All right, let's start with Ray Schwill's statement. Question: Officer Schwill, state your name. Ray O. Schwill II. How long have you been an employee of the Memphis Police Department? 8 years and approximately 3 or 4 months. What is your duty assignment? Assigned to North Precinct Uniform Patrol C Shift. Were you on duty Tuesday, January 11, 1983? I was. What shift did you work on that day? 4 to midnight shift. What was your car assignment? 128. Was this a one-man or a two-man car? This was a two-man car. Did you have a partner? I did. What was your partner's name? Robert Sterling Hester. Officer Schwill, where is 128's territory boundaries? It's bounded on the south by Jackson, west by McLean, east by Hollywood, and north by Wolf River. Do you have regular partners that you run this territory with? I do. Who are they? Robert Hester and Bill Cantrell. How long have you been assigned to this ward? A year and 9 months. Officer Schwill, going back to January 11, 1983, you made a call to 2239 Shannon. Can you advise where you were at the time you received the call, the type call you received? I can't remember exactly where we were. I feel like we were in the area of Chelsea and McLean. We were in the car on the street. We proceeded to Shannon address, parked in front and got out. Went to the front door and knocked on the door, at which time a voice inside told us to come in. We opened the door and pushed it open and looked inside and saw 3 male blacks sitting inside, and across the room with a brown phone in his hand was a male black who was talking to us. And he seemed to be upset and wanted to know what we wanted, and we explained to him we had received a call to this location in regards to a suspect of a purse snatch returned home, and that officers had been there earlier in the day. He was loud and abusive towards the officers, at which time I walked across the room to get closer to him and explained to him if he didn't call, that was fine. We were sorry. But we received a call to this location, and if he didn't know anything, we would leave. We didn't want to stay there if we weren't called. At this time, he shrugged and pointed to a young male black standing to my left who had a large afro and a blue windbreaker on and said, "That's him." I looked at this male black. I noticed that his looks were menacing. His fists were balled. He was breathing hard. I asked if he knew anything, and he stated he didn't know a motherfucking thing about the purse snatch. So I said, fine. Mr. Sanders started ranting again and looked around the room, at which time I noticed there were approximately 10 to 15 male blacks in the room. I noticed that those that were not those other than Mr. Sanders and the young male black with the blue windbreaker on were not looking at officers directly. They were looking at each other, cutting their eyes at each other. One particular male black was laid back, real relaxed like, on the couch, and several others were sitting on the edge of their seats. I also noticed that none of them made an attempt to help officers calm down the male black with the phone. It was kept rantings and going on. I advised them to calm down, that we could get it all straightened out. And at that time, I asked them to wait a minute, and I got my radio out and called for a backup. This seemed to make Mr. Sanders talk even louder, and I assured him we wanted no problems. And if he and his young man would step outside, that we could get all the problems ironed out. He continued to ask questions. At one point, he asked me if I knew Jesus, and I said, yes, I do. Do you? At which time he looked at me and said, yes. How come I got to answer your questions, but you won't answer mine? I said, but I just did answer your question. And he began repeating that over and over and over again. My partner had walked up behind me at this point, trying to calm the younger male black who was panting obviously, and then began to curse officers also. At this point, I advised them we were going outside to please come outside with us and we would get all this straightened out. We attempted to back up and they began to curse officers, saying we weren't going any fucking where. We advised them if we could step outside, we could get all this ironed out without any trouble, and turned to walk away, and the young male black struck me in the face with one of his fists. I backed up another step and said, please don't get upset, let's go outside. And he said, we're not going any fucking where. I told you, and launched to grab me. And as he did, the other male black said, let's get him now, or something to that effect. At this time, we grabbed the young male black and left the house through the front door, both Officer Hester and myself. Upon getting to the front porch, I again called for help. All the male blacks poured out on the front porch fighting Officer Hester and myself. I was pushed out into the front yard and followed upon by the male black who was on the phone. He was hitting me about the forehead with his fist, and I could hear my partner on the porch screaming, Ray, come get me, come help me, Ray, they got me. At this time, the male black in the blue jacket standing to my right began kicking me in the head, as was another male black standing on my left that I did not recognize. I tried to pull my pistol from my holster, but the male black who was on the phone was straddling me. I had trouble getting it from the holster. I did manage to get my hand on my gun and pull it out. As I did, someone screamed, he's getting his gun, he's getting his gun. At that time, someone dove on my hand and Sanders quit hitting me in the face and also tried to take my revolver away from me. I obtained control of the revolver by the barrel with my left hand and the butt of the gun by my right hand and began to try to wrestle it away from Sanders and whoever else was helping. At this point, I began to lose consciousness. I remember trying to pull the gun back to me and turn it. I could not get my finger on the trigger because there was a hand across the cylinder of the gun. There were fingers across the cylinder and trigger guard. As they pulled the gun away from me, I tried to pull it back, and I remember my head being moved further back away. My strength gave way, and I began to lose consciousness, and he obtained the gun. As the gun left my hand, it fired one time. At this time, I lost consciousness. I remember some discussion as to what to do with me. I remember someone saying, take him back inside. Some people picked me up under my arms and dragged me back into the house and threw me on the floor in the first room with my back up against a couch or a chair. So Lindberg and Michael were upset before the police arrived, is that correct? Yes, sir, I would say so. I will show you a spread of 7 MPD B of I photographs of police officers, and see if you can identify the first 2 officers that came to the house. Number 7939 and number 3434. For the record, Joe Coleman identified the B of I, number 3434, Officer Bob Hester, and number 7939, Officer Ray Schwill. Do you know either one of these officers by name? No. When the police got to the house and knocked on the door, who answered the door? Didn't nobody get up. Lindberg said, come on in. He seen the car through the window. How many police officers came in? 2 police officers came in. I will show you a spread of MPD B of I photographs of police officers and see if you can identify the first 2 officers that came in the house. Number 7939 and number 3434. Exactly what happened when these officers came in. The officers entered. 7939 asked if there was a call for them, and Berg asked them, did y'all did y'all have a warrant for Mike? And they said they didn't know, that they had got a call to come to this address about a disturbance. I think they said something like that. Then Lindberg asked them, was they looking for Mike? And they said they didn't know all. They didn't know. All they know was they was supposed to come to this address for some type disturbance. Lindberg told them that they had got a call saying that Mike had snatched a pocketbook, and they had called once, but he wasn't at home, and his brother had called down there and said the police was at the house looking for him. Ben called Mike and said that the police had been looking for them for purse snatching, and that he wanted them to call them and let them know where he was so they wouldn't think he was hiding from them. Between them talking, they started shouting at each other, Lindberg and Officer 7939. Then he stopped talking to him and said, where is Mike? And Mike had already stood up, was standing right beside Officer 7939. Him and Mike started talking. Then Officer 7939 said, well, come on with us. And Lindberg said, well, I'll go with him. And Lindberg and Officer 7939 exchanged a few more harsh words. And the Officer 7939 said, well, do everybody in this house feel the same way? Want to go with him? And they said, yes, we'll go with him. Officer 7939 grabbed Mike in the collar and pulled him out the door. Everybody was following him out the door because we're all going to go downtown with him. As Officer 7939 was leaving, he said there's going to be some attitude change around here, and he got on police radio and called for backup. As all of them, Officer 7939, Mike and Lindberg, was going out the door, Officer 3434 blocked the doorway, and I heard a scuffle, and I ran. I ran out the back door. Did you see any of the people in the room grab Officer 3434 and take him into the side bedroom? No, I didn't see. I heard Officer 3434. What was the matter? What have I done? Where was Officer 3434 at inside the house when you heard him ask this? In the bedroom door, between the living room and bedroom. Did you ever hear anything that sounded like somebody hitting somebody else? As I was leaving the kitchen going through the den, it sounded like somebody had gotten hit with an object. Real hard lick. After you heard what sounded like someone getting hit with a real hard lick, is this the time you heard Officer 3434 ask what was the matter? What have I done? I heard him ask the question first, then I heard the lick. After you heard the lick, did you ever hear Officer 3434 say anything? Yes, I heard him call out to his partner. He was calling him by his first name. I don't know his name. It sounded as if he was needing some help when he called for him. Did you ever see anyone in the house with one of the police officers' pistols? Yes, I seen Lonnie with it. Where was Lonnie at the time you saw him with the police officer's pistol? He was standing between the south bedroom and the hallway. After Lindberg, Michael, and Officer 7939 went out the front door, did you ever see them again? No, I never saw them again. Did you ever see anyone in the house shoot a pistol? No. Did you ever hear any gunshots coming from the house? Yes. How many? I heard 3 and several more after I was on the next street. Who all do you remember leaving the house with you? I know Reginald, Joe, Jackie, and TC. Those are the faces I see as I was leaving. When Lindberg stated to the police officers, we'll just all go downtown, arrest us all, did you make a move to go with Lindberg out the door to be arrested? No, I started. I stood up and debated whether to run right then out the back door. Did he get up and answer the door, or did he holler and tell them to come in? To the best of my knowledge, he hollered and told them to come in. I will show you a spread of 7 Memphis Police Department B&I photographs of police officers and see if you can identify the first 2 officers that came in the house. These 2 officers right here. For the record, he identified number 7939 Officer Ray Schwill and number 3434 Officer Bob Hester. Tyrone, I will ask you to state in your own words and in detail everything that occurred after the 2 officers entered your father's house. After the 2 officers knocked on the door and my father told them to come in, after the officers entered, they asked my father, did he call them? And my father said, didn't y'all call us? Then it started getting loud. The next thing I can remember said was Officer Schwill. I heard him say that some attitudes was going to change, and he asked for a backup. Then I saw Officer Schwill grab my father, and the other officer grabbed Mike. Then I heard my father say, no, y'all attitude is going to change. You want me to answer you, but you don't want to answer me. Then I saw the officer shove Michael into the fireplace in the living room, Officer Schwill. Then a lot of commotion broke out and everybody started going towards the officers and grabbed Officer Schwill and Hester. I hit Officer Schwill with my fist upside the head or somewhere, and the next thing I know, after I hit him, I got pushed back by the crowd. There's a big coffee table that hangs. I fell. The next thing I knew, my father had one of the officers' pistols, Officer Schwill. And I looked around and Lonnie had the other officer's pistol. Next thing that happened, I heard knock at the door. Then I heard kicking at the door. And as I heard the door being kicked, I ran out the back door and jumped the fence. When I ran, I left my father. He was on the north couch holding Officer Schwill and the pistol. The other officer was in the bedroom, and Lonnie had him and his pistol. When the police officers arrived at the house, what position in the house did they take? One of the police was standing in front of the fireplace. The other one was close by the 2 doors, the bedroom door and the living room door. Prior to the fight starting, had the officer struck or hurt anyone to cause the fight? The big officer grabbed Mr. Sanders real hard. He grabbed him and said, motherfucker, you come here. And that is when the big policeman already had Michael outside. He grabbed him first, pulled Mr. Sanders on out in the yard. Are you saying that the bigger officer took Michael outside and then came back inside for Mr. Sanders? We all got up and said, we are all going to jail. Lindberg was in the door when we said that, and then the little policeman at first had Lindberg, and all of us blocked off in the front door for a minute or so. Then the big officer reached and grabbed him, talking about Mr. Sanders, and said, motherfucker, you come here. The little officer moved out of the way when that happened. What had Lindberg said to make the officer grab him and not everybody else? Mr. Sanders had some papers in his hands. He tried to show them to the bigger of the officers. Mr. Sanders said something to the police that made the police mad. And the policeman said some attitudes was going to change. I have forgot what he said. Did Lindberg get real angry with the police because they would not look at the papers he was trying to show them? Yes, he did. What did Lindberg do or say to the officers at this time? He got real loud, Lindberg did. After Lindberg had got mad and loud, is that what caused the fight to start? I believe it is. Who struck the first blow? Michael Coleman. After Michael grabbed the officer that was standing at the door, who else grabbed this officer? Juju grabbed him. Cassell was there too. David was there, and Earl, I believe. It may have been more, but I didn't see who else. I moved out of the way. After the officer was grabbed and taken into the bedroom, where was the other officer? In the front yard. What was happening in the front yard and who was out there with the officer? It was a fight out in the yard, and Tyrone and Mr. Sanders was trying to get the gun from the officer outside. While he was outside in the fight, did you hear anything? Yes, I heard something. What did you hear? That was the first shot I heard. Where were you at this time? I went through the bedroom. I was just standing there looking at the officer on the bed. When I came into the kitchen, Lonnie was behind me with the officer's gun. When we stood in the hallway, they had already brought that officer in. I didn't see them bring him in. Which room did they bring the officer into? Into the living room. When you went to the bedroom, state who you saw in that bedroom and what were they doing. When I was in the bedroom, I saw Michael, Juju, Earl, Lonnie, and Cassell. Where did the police station themselves in when they got inside the house? One was at the door, closing the door behind him. The other one was right in front of him, standing there talking to Lindberg by the fireplace. I will show you some photographs of some police officers and see if you can identify the photographs of the first two officers on the scene. For the record, Mr. McCrae identified MPD number 3434 as being one of the first officers on the scene. He is not certain, but he believes that MPD number 7939 or number 3397 was one of the other officers. In what position in the house was the officer that you have identified number 3434 in at the time the fight started? The heavy-set officer walked across the room in front of the fireplace talking to Lindberg Sanders. Then Lindberg and the officer walked back across the room towards the door, and there was some papers and plastic. I don't know exactly what was on it. But like I say, this officer 3434 was beside the door, and this paper, he got it off the table. Then this makes the officer 3434 and the heavyset officer Lindberg Sanders and Michael Coleman all standing in front of the door. Which officer did the talking and what did he say when he first walked in the room? The heavyset officer, he says, you called us about a shoplifting or purse snatch or something. He said, the guy is here. Who was this officer directing this conversation to? At first, Lindberg Sanders, and then Lindberg said, this is the guy you're looking for, and pointed to Michael Coleman. Then was when the heavyset officer asked Michael about the purse snatch, and Michael replied, I ain't did a goddamn thing. And that's when Lindberg said, well, arrest us all for shoplifting, and told us we all was going out to line up by the car. The heavyset officer, I'm still laying on the floor watching, and said, we're going to have to change some attitudes in here. Then Lindberg says, no, we all going to get arrested and go downtown, and started out the door. Lindberg, Michael, David, Larnell, Juju, Cassell, and Tyrone, I believe, they got up and started heading towards the door. And then the heavyset officer was outside with Lindberg, and the slim officer, number 3434, stopped him at the door, and I don't know which one of the seven in the crowd it was, started to push back. After you got up and moved to the rear of the living room, what did you observe then? I observed Michael Coleman and about three others with the slim officer go through the bedroom door right to the left of the front door. The heavyset officer Lindberg and one in that crowd I think Tyrone was wrestling out the front door. Then I heard a lick in the bedroom. Somebody hitting somebody where they had the slim officer at. Almost instantly, I heard a shot in the front where the heavyset officer Lindberg and other Tyrone was. Then I looked back in the living room, and the heavyset officer was sitting down in the front of the fireplace. Tyrone was standing in front of the door, which is now closed, front door, and Lindberg is sitting on the couch right beside the front door in the living room with the officer's pistol in his hand. I then heard the officer ask Lindberg what the hell is going on, and about the same time this officer, heavyset one, made a grab for the gun in Lindberg's hand. Then Tyrone, David, and Earl grabbed the officer and pulled him back and set him down by the fireplace. Then I looked into the bedroom and I saw the slim officer on the floor with his head towards the east bedroom wall, and Michael Coleman and Juju were beating on him. I also saw Larnell with the slim officer's gun standing by the door in the bedroom where the slim officer was at. I did notice that the slim officer was holding his police radio with both hands up against his chest. I don't know if he was trying to talk into it or what. Okay, that's going to wrap up part 2. I did want to make the comment, though, that one of the statements, it was Tyrone Henley's statement, he mentioned that when Officer Schwill asked, "Didn't you call us?" that Lindberg said in reply, "Well, didn't y'all call us?" And that leads me to believe that Lindberg thought these were the same officers who had called from Michael Coleman's mama's place. Or at the very least, that they were aware of what was going on. And I think that was the main problem. I think that's where everything went south, was Lindberg, like a lot of people think, they think if one policeman knows something, all policemen know something. Well, they don't. And I think in this particular case, Lindberg believed these were the same officers that was looking for Michael. Now, Bobby Hester and Ray Schwill have no idea what's going on. So I think that got them off on the wrong foot, and then it just went to pieces after that. Now, the issue with whether I think Lindberg set this up, he was setting the two officers up, I don't believe that's what was going on. When everybody in the house stood up, Lindberg says, "We'll all go to jail for shoplifting," I think all Lindberg was doing was doing like they had done in other instances during protest, and that is everybody go to jail. So that's all they were going to do. They were just going to walk outside, and they were all going to get arrested and go to jail because Michael Coleman hadn't done anything wrong. So in protest, they were all going to get locked up with him. And I think that's what was going on. So it's really a tragedy that you have that misunderstanding and that people didn't communicate as well as they should. Of course, in that day and age, you didn't have the CIT program that you do today, the Crisis Intervention Team, which Memphis was the first department to have that, by the way. Those officers are specially trained to deal with those people who are mentally ill. And I think a situation like that today would have been handled much differently, and you would not have had the tragedy that you did. So anyways, thank y'all for y'all's time and patience, and we're going to get to part 3, and this will be the final part of episode 3, and we'll finish up the call with that, and then we'll go on to the next stage after that. So I will see y'all in a few days, and we'll continue to march through this stuff. Thank you.